Okay, everybody, thank you very much for coming out here tonight. On behalf of everyone here at Startup UCLA, I want to welcome you to our speaker series tonight with Jeff Jordan. A little bit about Startup UCLA. Its mission is to develop a culture of startup thinking here on campus, to connect students and recent alumni to the entrepreneurial scene, both here and in California, and then also to give them a platform to launch their own ideas with an accelerator that we run during the summer. A couple of our key UCLA supporters have been the Dean of Social Sciences, the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research, the Price Center, alumni like Dr. Michael J. Burry, as well as sponsorships from outside like PwC with their innovation office, Manat for legal services, and Joyent for their hosting. So with that, I'd like to give a little bit of background for the two people who are here on stage. First, doing the interview tonight is Brendan Rauw, who is our Associate Vice Chancellor and Executive Director for Entrepreneurship here at UCLA. He heads up the Office of Intellectual Property and is also formerly of Columbia University, where he had great success in a similar role, and before that in the Boston Consulting Group. So we're lucky to have him doing this tonight. And we'd like to also welcome Jeff Jordan of Andreessen Horowitz, who's an investing partner there. Jeff has had a very distinguished career as both on the company side and now on the investor side. A couple of interesting companies that he's on the board for that will be major names for you guys are Airbnb, Belly, Circle, Fab, Lookout, OpenTable, Pinterest, Wealthfront, and Zoosk. So some incredible names on that list, and certainly will lead to some interesting insights here. For those of you who aren't familiar with his background, he was previously the chairman and CEO of OpenTable, and prior to that, he was the president of PayPal. So two incredible companies, but it doesn't even stop with that. He was also had senior positions at eBay and the Walt Disney Company and some other things that I'm sure will come out tonight. So we're really excited to have him here, and Andreessen Horowitz has been a great sponsor of our program and been very supportive of what Startup UCLA has been doing. We have a format tonight where there's going to be about 40 minutes of interview with Brendan and Jeff, and then there's going to be a little Q&A in the audience, so get your questions ready for that. Unfortunately, Jeff is catching a flight right after this, so he's going to be making a beeline out of here, so to give you guys a little heads up on that, so try and get your questions primed. And there is going to be food afterwards for you guys, so you're welcome to socialize afterwards. The final announcement I'd like to make is that we will be doing our next speaker series in January. More details will be coming out through the Startup UCLA website, but it's going to be Mitch Matthews. She's the former CMO of Microsoft. She held that position for 22 years and oversaw over $1 billion spend on their marketing and ad sales when she left. So it should be something to look forward to. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brendan.
Thanks, Robert, and welcome, Jeff. It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure to be able to share the stage with you today. Where I wanted to start was, I'm interested in your background and how you came from doing a poli-sci and psychology degree at Amherst and ended up in the tech industry in California.
Right.
I think that'd be of interest to a lot of people here today.
Long story. I'm a little older than you guys, so I actually when I was at Amherst College, the PC was just coming out. And so I was fascinated by it, and Amherst allowed they had no classes in computers, but they allowed you to take classes at neighboring colleges. So I applied to take a PC class at UMass Amherst, which was a mile away. And they turned it down, saying Amherst did not condone classes in the trades. So I was asked this question in a different way in one of my more notable moments in Silicon Valley. I got an interview with Steve Jobs. And Steve, we met at a restaurant in Palo Alto, and he kept me waiting like 15 minutes. He walks in wearing a ratty T-shirt and chacos and sits down. And he just comes right at me and says, okay, I looked at your resume, and I'm confused. First of all, you went to business school at Stanford, the middle of Silicon Valley, and all this entrepreneurs going over, and you became a effing management consultant. What were you thinking of? And then the second one, he goes, okay, and then you work at the Walt Disney Company, the Disney stores. I hate Disney. The Disney stores suck. And then he just sits back and looks at you. And he's like, okay, all right, that's a good open. And so, I said, okay, I stipulate that it was stupid to be a management consultant, but Disney stores don't suck. And it was funny, it was a stress test. He was just trying to say, okay, you're going to wilt under what he does every day. And the fact I didn't wilt, he's, okay, yeah, let me tell you what we're doing at Pixar, then at Apple. And so, it was pretty interesting. But I've been asked this question before. I am not a technologist and I can't code. And what I found in Silicon Valley is that being a technologist who can code would be an advantage, but not being able to do that is not a huge disadvantage. What I found I think I'm pretty good at in the Valley is one, it's getting the right strategic direction for a company, but also I love internet product. I love designing product, and the way we grew, eBay and PayPal and OpenTable, was we made the product better. And you don't need to be able to code to say, this product is lame. When I got to OpenTable, they didn't have, we're a restaurant reservation site. We had no maps, we had no reviews, we had no, so you add those, you make it nice, you make them work, and the businesses grow. And so I found that it's a disadvantage when I'm sitting through pitches on new Hadoop architecture. I actually had to look up Hadoop on Wikipedia in the pitch, which was a little embarrassing. There's something called a hypervisor that in the virtual machines that I'm notified once said, a hypervisor, what is it and who named it? And so it's, but what you found is, if you have a passion, you have an interest, it hasn't been a barrier.
But you ultimately left Disney not to necessarily join Steve Jobs, but to join what you later described as one of the worst e-commerce businesses ever invented.
It was.
What did you take away from that experience?
Don't go to shitty companies. The company I joined, so I was at Disney. I was a CFO of the Disney stores. It was really interesting, but these were the late 90s, and the internet was clearly coming, and my friends are going to internet companies. So I kind of intellectually said, I've got to get to an internet company. Disney was also had this historic run, but the run was starting to end clearly. The growth was slowing. So I got an inbound from a guy who'd been trying to hire me forever, and it was the CEO of a company called Hollywood Entertainment that ran the Hollywood video stores, and I was in retail, so that kind of made sense. But he was buying an internet company called Reel.com, REEL.com, which was the internet movie superstore. We sold DVDs online. So I said, okay, I'm in the internet. The guy's saying, we're going to combine the digital assets of Reel.com with the physical assets of Hollywood Video to do video on demand, which was, that was a great story. That was completely fiction. It was about a decade too early. Netflix has since done it, but we were trying to do it 12 years ago. So the company spent, my first year there, $40 million in marketing to generate $40 million in revenue, and they had a gross margin loss. Forget an operating margin loss. They lost money on every DVD they sold. So you're looking at this kind of like, okay, more marketing than revenue, and everything every incremental item we sold, we lose more money. So that's a good model. We were going public in 1998. Just to show how crazy the market was at then. And I'm looking at this thing like, this is the worst business I've ever seen. So I'm CEO of an internet company, e-commerce company, trying to go public during the bubble's still on. I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is the worst business I've ever seen. So I called my old boss at Disney, who was really helpful and tried to help me extricate myself from this deal. And so I tell the CEO of the parent company I'm leaving. And it was funny, the next phone call my ex-boss at Disney got was from my hiring manager at Disney, who happened now to be running eBay. It was Meg Whitman. And so Meg called Larry and said, there is no warm body left in Silicon Valley who isn't already working at an internet company. I need someone outside of Silicon Valley. Can you think of anyone who I can hire to be a manager? And I just hung up from Jeff. You remember him, you hired him, right? So that's how I actually ended up at eBay. And for me, it's the easiest decision in the world, because I went from the worst business model in the internet to one of the absolute best business models of the internet. So, I turned down all these presidents of e-commerce companies to go to eBay and manage 2 people, but I so believed in eBay and the model and what they were doing. And I joined managing 2 people. I left 7 years later managing 6,000.
And you went from eBay to PayPal. Correct?
Well, there's 2 ways to do that. One would be changing. The other is we bought the company. So I was managing the eBay marketplace, ebay.com, and for those, you're all probably weren't there at the time, but it used to be before PayPal that every transaction on eBay was essentially paid for with a money order. And I mean, and literally you had to go to the bank or the post office. When I got there, I said, where do you go to get a money order? I mean, just there was so much friction that you'd buy on eBay and you'd go to the post office and get a money order. You'd mail it to the seller. The seller would go, deposit the money and then mail you the good. So tons of friction, which was what PayPal ended up solving. But when I'm running eBay and PayPal is owned by a different company, it's like I don't own my cart. Imagine trying to buy something on Amazon and you can't figure out how to pay. That was the experience on eBay. We were suppressing PayPal because we had a competitive offer. So I, just started begging Meg, saying, we have to buy them, we have to buy them, we have to buy them. And it took 5 or 6 different M&A conversations, but we finally got the deal done. And then after we bought it and integrated, I went over a year or 2 later to manage that.
So how did you make the decision to go from an operating role in some of these companies to a venture capitalist?
Yeah, no, it was funny. I wouldn't trade the experience of operating the 3 businesses I did. I would trade Real.com every day for the rest of my life. But eBay, PayPal, and OpenTable. I mean they've got a lot of similarities, but it's a privilege to be able to work in companies like that and have the impact you have. There's some things on the so it was personally challenging, rewarding, and enriching. It also is hard work. You are always on. And the stress level is high. So if I was an operator and I woke up at 3 in the morning, your brain just kicks in and you're saying, okay, what's Google trying to do to us in Japan? Or what's, you just can't, particularly in the internet, things come at you so fast and there's so much disruption. We were disrupting, but there were people who wanted to disrupt the disruptor. And so it is completely engaging and consuming. So having done it for 12 years, after we took OpenTable public, I'd done it for over 10 years and I found I was still tired, stressed, but I got bored. I kept going back to the earlier stage. And when I first did it at eBay, the learning curve was enormous. I made so many mistakes, and hopefully I learned from them and I got better. PayPal, I'd done eBay, so back in an earlier stage, I got better at it. By the time I'd done it at OpenTable, I went back to managing 200 people again. And I loved the early stage, but I wasn't learning. And so if you're not learning and being challenged, for me, that was a big issue. So when I got approached by a couple firms, venture firms, about, are you interested in being an investor? And what I looked at it, and what I'd done when I got bored at OpenTable is I started working with early stage companies. And so I'd be an advisor or board member or seed investor. And so when Mark and Ben were interviewing me, they said, hey, some CEOs, don't have time to do anything. Some try to get involved with an outside company or 2. Do you ever do that? I go, yeah. And you go, tell me about some. So I started rattling them off, and I think I got to 12. And they're looking at me like, you're actively working with 12 early stage companies? And well, they're the ones I remember, but yeah, 12. And they go, why? And he goes, because that's where I'm having fun. So for some extent, to get a new challenge, I traded being an amateur for doing it professionally. I mean, so it's, for me, it was the right move at the right time. I mean, I was ready for that next challenge.
Well, you described eBay as a disruptive company and some of the companies you work for. Andreessen Horowitz has also been described as disruptive within the venture community. How do you think Andreessen's model is different?
Well, I was in the very fortunate position. I think there are about a half dozen venture firms that have differential access to deals, to entrepreneurs. And a lot of them are the storied firms. You've all heard of Sequoia, Excel. Greylock, I think, is in that path now. But for me, if I was going to be a venture capitalist, I wanted to work at one of those because you just get to access, you get a different deal flow. You get to work with the highest quality entrepreneurs are walking in your door. It's just more interesting. What Mark and Ben did, our company is only 3 years old. And so they designed the venture firm they wanted when they were, from their experience being operators. So they were operators, they got funded by Benchmark Capital, which is a fine firm, and their investing partner was a very good friend of mine named Andy Ratcliffe. And they like Andy, and they think Andy added a lot of value to his company. But what they got in Andy was they got 1/12 of his time that wasn't spent looking at new deals, and they got his network. So, I mean, you're not getting the Benchmark network, you're getting Andy's network, So if he knew someone, it worked out great. So they did a couple major things to reposition the firm. The first is they thought that the investing partners would be more valuable in the boardroom if they'd had experience starting and scaling technology companies. So every one of our GPs has been a founder or led a fast, highly scaled company. Not sure, the jury's out on whether that makes us better investors. It does make us better board members because you've been there, you've done that, and working with the companies, it helps. The second thing they did, and this was the most disruptive by far, is the fee income on managing money can get quite high. And it was never, the rate was set at times when the funds were really low. So the fee income originally was intended to keep the lights on, to help pay operating expenses, and then the long-term compensation was the carry. Well, the funds got so big and the rate didn't change that there is extraordinary amount of fee income from I think our last fund was $1.5 billion. And so the most disruptive thing they did is they took most of that income, and instead of paying it out in guaranteed partner salaries, which is what our competitive set does, they invested it in building a firm that provided support services to our entrepreneurs. So, and those basically they're building out networks. So we help our entrepreneurs through having built networks, hire executive talent, hire engineering and designers, meet with customers. We actually have an executive briefing center on the first floor where 400 strategic companies are going to go through this year and meet portfolio companies. I think it's something like 5,000 meetings or something where our portfolio companies are getting access to executives like Jeff Immelt at GE and the CEO of Samsung. We have a network of press people. So we have 65 people in the firm. Only 6 invest. Most of the other 59 work directly with our portfolio companies. So the value, so they get my investments get 1/8 of my time now that I'm not looking at new deals. They also get help with their executive recruiting, with their press relations, with their hiring engineers, with their selling to building relationship with strategic customers. And it's just a differentiated value proposition that the CEOs really resonate with. So anytime we're in a competitive deal, we have an unfair advantage. We just say, call any of our CEOs. We're telling you we're different. You don't have to believe us. Talk to our CEOs. And the CEOs love it because we help them be more successful.
So the venture industry has been struggling recently.
Yep.
Is this the future of the venture industry? Where do you think it's headed?
We published the roadmap. It's interesting, not many people have emulated it because to emulate it, the general partners have to give up most of their cash income. And you're talking multi-million dollars a year. And so none of them have done it, surprisingly. So, and he can. But we're not holding our breath anymore that people will match it. We think this is a better way to. We think the way that the firm is established is a better way to do venture capital. It gives more support to entrepreneurs when they want it, we think it helps make them more successful. And we would love people to match it because we actually would love more successful companies, but we're not holding our breath.
Okay. So I suspect there are a lot of future entrepreneurs in the audience right now who would be very curious to know, what do you think about when you're evaluating an investment opportunity?
Yeah. First and foremost, the quality of the founding team. So at a high level, there's 3 things you look at. You look at the entrepreneurs, the market. Is it a good market, big market typically, and the product market fit that they've demonstrated or hope to demonstrate. The one we try not to break is bet behind the great entrepreneur, because a great entrepreneur who in a good market who hasn't figured out their product probably will, but a great market with a great product and a crappy entrepreneur probably won't fulfill their destiny. So the first and foremost is an entrepreneur who has the right background for what they're doing, is tenacious, because being an entrepreneur is hard, and then more than anything, wants to go for it, wants to build an important company. Our investment thesis is a handful of companies each year create virtually all the returns in venture capital. It's a hit-driven business. It's Hollywood. One Google can make a fund, can make a firm, so we want to be in those companies, but to actually hit those home runs is the entrepreneur has to come up with a great idea, execute it well, and want to keep going. Because someone will offer them an acquisition offer along the way. I mean, one of the questions when it's something I really like, you always ask, oh, so who's offered to buy it so far? And what you want is the entrepreneur who says, I'm not interested in selling. And for me, the prototype here is Mark Zuckerberg. I swear, I think Mark, who I think is brilliant, will be running Facebook when he's 65 years old. I mean, it is his baby. He's had every offer to sell it along the way. He turned down $1 billion early. I mean, just that, it's that kind of maniacal, passionate, to the death approach that, that's what we're really looking for. And if an entrepreneur has that, then we start looking at, if our perception is they have that, we start looking at market, start looking at product fit. But it's that, it's an entrepreneur who won't fail and wants to take it all the way.
So to be a great entrepreneur, are there skills that can be learned, or is this just a factor of the personality and the person?
I mean, I think they're both. Drew Houston at Dropbox is, I think, one of the best new CEOs. And I listen to podcasts while I mountain bike, and I listened to an interview with Drew once out of the Stanford Innovation Center. And Drew was an MIT computer science major who he described he got on a bus going to New York one day, and he was planning to code the whole way, and he realized he forgot the thumb drive, so he couldn't do what he planned to do. And he goes, how stupid is it, one, that I forgot the thumb drive, but two, that I need a thumb drive to carry my files. Why isn't it in the cloud? So he just started coding the cloud thing. So, CS guy. What he quickly realized is that wasn't the only skill he had to have. So he describes his journey in going to school. He, among the, I don't know what marketing is. He'd go on Amazon and buy the 5 best marketing books and absorb them, and then know enough that he'd interview 10 marketing people and try to get a sense for what it worked. But so he came with great skills, but he also realized I got to supplement them. One of the things you understand quickly in the Valley is everyone is the entrepreneurs network like crazy. They're learning from each other hugely. I think, and social stuff has only made this more the case. So there is a complete network of, early stage entrepreneurs who are helping each other fill gaps, because every new entrepreneur has huge gaps. They can't not. I mean, the first time I managed, something like eBay, I mean, the amount of stuff I'd never done before and didn't know was huge, and I wasn't even a founder. I came in when there were 200 employees. So it's, I think there's raw material that needs to be there. There's a bunch of it that can be learned, and part of it is you have to want to learn it. You have to have great self-awareness on what you're good at and what you're not, and you have to be a great judge of talent.
So what's the best advice you'd offer somebody who is about to graduate, who wants to get into this field, but doesn't necessarily have the idea or the opportunity? Should they be seeking out startups? Should they be trying to do something on their own?
Yeah, if you don't have an idea, you probably shouldn't try to do something on your own. I mean, if you haven't found it yet, doing something when you're not passionate about your idea or you don't think you have it, it's hard enough being successful when you have a great idea. So, I mean, one would be, you don't have the idea, don't fake it. I think it's, if you don't have an idea, I think it's great to try to get into a well-run, fast-growing tech company and get that experience. I worked at Disney, and we thought Disney at the time was considered a paragon of management talent and incentive and fast-moving company. I look back after having worked in a number of tech companies and say, oh my God, it moved at glacial speed. We'd study things for a quarter that in the Valley you have to make that decision in an hour. And you're not doing it with management consultants. You're doing it half through with whatever facts you can throw together quickly, and then you have to make it through gut. And so, it is, yeah. I mean,
what about failure, though? I mean, even some of the best-run tech companies end up failing.
Yeah.
Most do.
Yeah.
So,
and even the ones that work have tons of failure along the way. The entrepreneur has to be unbelievably resilient and pound their way through failure. I mean, failure is not an option or whatever it is. But if obstacles slow you down, don't be an entrepreneur. I mean, because there's obstacles everywhere. I mean, the near-death experiences, the kick saves, the pivots. PayPal started as it was a way to beam money between Palm Pilots. Do anyone of you know what a Palm Pilot is? to do a Palm Pilot largely were little PDAs that kept your contact list, and in order to connect it with your computer, you literally had to dock it So in order to make a payment with PayPal, you had to send it on your Palm Pilot and dock it to your computer. Okay, a lot of friction there. An engineer came up, so then they said that wasn't working well. They tried this, they tried that. They tried to become an online currency, they tried to become an online bank. An engineer had the idea, instead of docking your Palm Pilot, what if we build an internet program where you can you enter the payment on the computer? And a couple months later, the business is exploding, and they don't know why. And so they call these users saying, who are you and why are you doing this? And he goes, oh, I'm an eBay seller. I'm an eBay seller. I'm an eBay seller. And so they stumbled on the fact that eBay had a huge friction in their payment process. It wasn't designed to solve the friction. It was it was an engineer who came up with, on the 5th iteration of PayPal with what he thought was a feature. And it exploded into a company. So, I mean, you have to, but the PayPal guys kept going each step of the way. When the online currency didn't work, when the beaming between Palm Pilots didn't work. I mean, you have to have that resilience because, even in the companies that work, there are issues all over. I mean, yeah.
So you've worked with a lot of the people in the top tier in Silicon Valley. I mean, who are some of the best leaders that you hold in high regard, and what have you learned from them?
So leader versus CEO. So the firm has a strong bias to founder-led companies. In technology, virtually every company that creates value is run by its founder. I mean, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, Larry Page, Zuckerberg. It is such a potentially. It's such a fork in the road when the founder leaves, and can you find a professional manager who can manage that company, in the environment? And the Valley's littered with, professionally run companies that ran aground. I mean, Yahoo would be an example. When Jerry wanted to step back, the company did not thrive, and you kind of tick down the list. So we do everything we can to back founders. And one of the reasons we make this huge investment in support for our companies is to try to help make founders successful, because it's hard to be a founder. And that is a thing. A couple of the people I think are brilliant. I said a couple of them. Mark Zuckerberg truly is brilliant. I mean, he is. The gears are spinning. I mean, He knows what he has. He's preternaturally mature. I got to know him before I joined OpenTable. I was hanging out on Facebook, and Mark was kind of looking for mentorship. And I go, why are you looking for mentorship? He goes, well, I've never run a company. I go, yeah. He goes, what you don't know is I've never worked for a company. And you're like, okay, you're running Facebook and you've never had a job. And so can you imagine? Yeah, but he put it out there. We think Drew Houston at Dropbox. We're not an investor. Brilliant. We love him. I get to work with two that I think are really good up-and-comers. Brian Chesky at Airbnb is brilliant and passionate and driven and is growing like crazy. And then Ben Silberman at Pinterest with an exactly opposite personality from Brian. Brian's jubilant and a showman, and Ben is quiet as the day's long, but just incredible intensity, gets things done. Believes he can do anything. So I mean, why I do what I do is it is so energizing to get to work with the quality of entrepreneurs that we get to work with, and they are. I mean, it's alchemy. They're taking these ideas and making them into real companies, and watching these companies explode and grow, and literally change the world. I get paid to do that, which is fun.
So conventional business school wisdom is that it requires a different skill set to be like a founding entrepreneur versus running an established company with a large revenue stream. Yep. As you scale up, what are the challenges you've seen them face? And
it is a completely different skill set, and I got to learn this at eBay. And my analogy was a sports analogy. I played basketball, and early on, when you're first working at a company, you're kind of like a player. You're on the field, and things are crashing around, and you're right in the action, and the adrenaline's really high. And then as the company grows, your role changes. First, you become a player coach or a coach, where you actually have to hire people who are making most of the decisions, and you manage them. And then, as you scale up, you start becoming like the general manager who hires the coaches who are managing the players. And then, by the time I was at PayPal, I felt like the commissioner of the league. You are so far from the action. I mean, I called it doing a bunch of shuns, and it was organization, communication, motivation. But what I didn't do was what I love doing, which is designing net product, talking to the customers, just getting your hands really dirty. Someone else gets to do that. So the job, managing 2 people and managing 6,000 could not be more different. And I had less fun each year.
To shift gears a little bit, there are obvious differences between Silicon Valley and Los Angeles. What do you think of the ecosystem for entrepreneurs within Los Angeles? What opportunities do you see here?
Right. Overall, the firm has a belief that I believe that there is something unique in Silicon Valley. There's a confluence of factors. You have capital, you have talent, particularly engineering talent. In depth, you have support services in legal and in banking. For me, the analogy is the entertainment business in LA, where all of that is here already. I mean, the capital, talent, support infrastructure. That said, we see interesting companies being built everywhere. I love this story. 3-4 years ago, she was an eBay seller in the vintage category. And now she's sitting on a rocket ship of a business in Nasty Gal. And so, so it can be built. Friends of mine in LA have managed Fandango, have managed Business.com, Shopzilla. So, there are businesses that can be built anywhere. I think the biggest challenge is you're more on your own. There isn't that support network. Every entrepreneur I know interacts multiple times daily with 20 other entrepreneurs. So that support network in the background is really, really important. I think that's less visible here, less developed here. And then at some point, you're going to have a hard time hiring engineers. If your company explodes, what we found is the companies we're investing in who exploded outside of the Valley typically move their engineering function, either supplement or move their engineering function to the Valley, where there's unbelievably aggressive talent wars for the best engineering talent, but it's the best engineering talent. So we're in Foursquare. Dennis ran out of engineers to hire in New York. He opened a Bay Area facility. Groupon ran out of engineers in Chicago. They moved engineering to the Bay Area. So you see that happening. So the biggest challenge, I think, is a lack of support network, and the depth of the engineering talent pool is going to be different. That said, I think all it takes to start changing that is a few hits. The startup scene in New York's getting pretty hot now, but they still can't hire engineers, and there are tons of engineers around. But they're all working at financial institutions, the trading firms and the banks, because they pay them a boatload of cash. And so the engineer says, I get a boatload of cash, or I get a little bit of cash and this paper called equity. And until their friend makes a boatload of money on that equity, like happens in the Bay Area every day, you're not going to value the equity, and you can't hire the best engineers. As soon as there are a couple big wins, like Buddy Media is a pretty big win in New York. So there are a lot of people who that paper, surprise, it's money. And when that happens, so I think if LA gets a few wins, any place that gets a few wins, I think gets more momentum and gets more, that's what starts the building process. And, for me, LA's got some tantalizingly interesting companies and tantalizingly interesting opportunities. You can build a business here, but it's a little harder.
So until we get those big wins, what role could a campus like UCLA play to try and move us forward and facilitate entrepreneurs?
I did this because I admire the effort. Just as I understand it, this is people from different parts of the school, all who have an interest in startups. That's great. One of the things you're doing is networking, learning, all the things that the Valley kind of has set up, but you can replicate it through effort. The Valley started working because of Stanford in particular, but Berkeley. Great engineering schools, a couple wins. Actually, the first was Hewlett-Packard and Fairchild Computing, and it kind of built from there. But the role of Stanford in the Valley is enormously important. And yet, so the engineering school has fostered, recently Yahoo came out of it, Google came out of it. Huge companies. The business school, has their set of wins. I'm a business school graduate. The design school has their own program. And even at Stanford, they're not that well connected. So an effort like this that connects different people, all with a passion, from different backgrounds, all with a passion for startups, I think it's a great start. You need a great engineering program. Just because that is the lifeblood of IT, internet, information technology, new companies. So kind of trying to marry those, and then ideally some mentorship. People who, grads, UCLA grads who have made it work. So a guy we're close to in our firm is Blake Krikorian, who started a company called Slingbox. Great company, great success. He's a UCLA grad. Drag his ass down here. Yeah.
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
So I have one last question, but before I ask it, I did want to indicate that we have time for Q&A. And so
Excellent.
there are 2 mics that are available in the room for anybody who wants to step up and ask a question. And then we'll open it up to the audience after this.
Great.
So what I wanted to finish with is, so what gets you excited about the future? Where do you see tech going from here? What are you passionate about?
I'm an old guy. I've seen a lot. I think we are at a point in time where there is more disruptive change going on through digitization than this is one of those in historical perspectives will be the changing of the era from the industrial age to the information age. And the driver, part of it is just sheer mass. The connected world has gotten huge. Part of it is mobile. There are 5 or 6 billion mobile phones in the world. Soon they will all be small computers in your pocket. And the difference between a feature phone and a smartphone is night and day. So these markets are just getting so big that if you get the right idea, they can get so big so fast that they can actually cause meaningful disruption, which is just has the old world under siege. So I've got a couple, we're supposed to blog in the job. I just blogged about, I think Best Buy, I think most of physical retail will not exist as we know it in 5 years. I mean, the blog post was tongue-in-cheek called Buy BBY question mark, which is Best Buy, because Amazon's growing like crazy in electronics. Best Buy's comp store sales has gone somewhat negative. Physical retailers are unbelievably highly leveraged with real estate and labor and everything else. And if comp store sales fall just enough, they're insolvent. So you saw that happen in Circuit City, Borders, about to happen in Barnes and Noble, all the music stores. It's going to permeate through the thing. So the beneficiaries of that are e-commerce companies. So we are so bullish on e-commerce. Witness a $1 billion reported valuation on Zulily today. I just blogged about USPS. They're dying. I mean, the volume of mail in 4 years has dropped by like 20-25%, and it's just going to keep going down because the only thing that needs to be delivered in the future are packages from e-commerce companies, and they're not particularly good at shipping. USPS isn't good at shipping. We're seeing that my partner Mark Andreessen has this phrase called "software eats the world," and so we go through every verticals that are obvious like media and retail, verticals that are non-obvious. I mean, cars. The amount of silicon in a car is doubling every year. One of my entrepreneurs. Told me, what do you do this weekend? I was hacking into cars. I go, how do you hack into cars? He goes, through the nav systems. I can turn them on and turn them off. And you're saying like, don't tell me, don't tell me. I don't want to hear this. But I mean, there is so much change going on in the world, and you just it's a privilege to sit in the office where you got 2 pitches a day. The entrepreneur comes in and say, I'm going to tell you why. Cisco's dead, and networking is going to be done in the future on software and not on hardware. And you listen to that. That pitch ended up being Nicera that EMC just bought for $1.1 billion. Every segment we look at, someone's got their sights set on it using software instead of hardware and traditional approaches. So the amount of disruption and the pace at which it's happening and the audaciousness of the entrepreneurs in chasing it is unlike anything I've ever seen. And so, I mean, I find it just so energizing that a whole new economic world order is coming into play right in front of our eyes, and I get a front row seat for it. So, I mean, it's fun to go to work.
Well, Jeff, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to open it up to the audience now for any questions that people have.
I guess we'll take.
So my question is, as long as everyone can hear me.
For the recording, it's helpful as well.
Okay. So thank you very much. And my question is, when should a new company approach a firm like yours? You're a very mature, reputable firm. What milestones should they have accomplished And what's too small for you guys?
So hopefully we're reputable, and we aspire to be mature. We are a unique firm in that part of the, we're trying to get in the 10 companies that create all the value each year. That results in our being stage agnostic. So we write $50,000 seed checks. We write $100 million growth checks, and so we didn't exist 3 years ago, so there were a bunch of companies we weren't in that we got in late rounds. You miss things. I mean, we said no to both the Pinterest and Airbnb A rounds and didn't make that mistake in the B rounds. So we will invest in any stage of company. So what you get at different stages is different things. Seed, typically, your real true seed, your early money in, and you're betting on a person and an idea, and then. With each, as the rounds escalate, you want to see more proof points, more traction. There's a difference between consumer and enterprise deals, and we do both investing. We've looked historically, and the average returns to an investment on the two aren't that similar, but how they get there are really different. The enterprise deals have a much higher hit rate and typically lower average outcomes when they hit. It's kind of the $400 million sale, $800 million sale. With SaaS, it's starting to change a little bit, $1 billion or $2 billion, but that's a little the anomaly. Where consumer has much lower hit rate, but a much higher average return if it hits. So it's much more of the hit-driven business. So we find we typically invest in enterprise companies earlier, where you're betting on an entrepreneur who has experience in a vertical, and you trust that through good execution they can grind it out, and that's worked well for us. We're typically in the venture deals a little later on consumer because you're looking for that lightning in a bottle. You want to see that proof point that okay, they've achieved product market fit. And when you do that in consumer a lot, it's hard to stop it. When something really starts working, it typically continues to work.
Just to follow up on that question, from an entrepreneur's perspective, when should you seek to bootstrap, and when should you seek to approach a firm like yours?
I'm a fan of bootstrapping as long as you can. The plummeting cost of starting a company, which you might be a reality with you guys, but people used to have to raise $10 million to start an internet company because they buy their own servers, build their own data center. I mean, it took time. Engineering was less efficient. So the more you can prove before you take money, the higher your valuation, and the higher your likelihood you're going to succeed. So if you got a business plan, that's like okay, there's a rate card for a business plan that you like. But if you got tantalizing early results, you have a product, some people are using it, you're going. That's a completely different conversation with a completely different valuation / dilution involved in it. So the more you can't be ridiculous, but the more you can get accomplished on less, the better off you are. And in this world, you can get a lot accomplished on very little. There was a story of in the Valley. AOL often throws open their doors for entrepreneurs. One took this literally and lived there for 2.5 months, eating their ramen every night. And they finally caught him, and they were kind of embarrassed that someone roamed the halls for 2.5 months, basically sleeping in conference rooms when everyone went home. But talk about scrappy, and he got a ton done, and that's what you're always impressed with people who get a lot done on modest resources, be that modest resources a small A round or bootstrapped or whatever. I mean, you take it as a leading indicator for how they're going to spend your money.
Hi, my name is Jesse. I have a question on sustaining growth. If I'm correct, OpenTable took many, many years to acquire millions of users.
Yes.
So what are some effective strategies to sustain growth if it's going to probably take years to acquire that many users?
So it's funny, OpenTable's got an interesting, unique model. It's a very slow build model for a couple reasons. One is you have to get the restaurants to throw out their pen and paper book and computerize their seat inventory through our product and electronic reservation book, and you have to sell that one restaurant at a time. And then you have to do that in increasing number of markets. So it's that local play. So anytime you need to physically sell a product one restaurant at a time. Virtually every restaurant's owned by an individual proprietor at the high end. And then you have to replicate that in multiple markets. It's a really slow rollout. So OpenTable, fortunately, was started at a time when no one was funding new businesses. So essentially, they had about a half decade of runway without any competition, which let them do that. If OpenTable were to start today, I don't think the company would be anywhere near as successful, because the emulation that is rampant today. If someone gets a great idea and proves it in, when Uber proved out that model in San Francisco, there was a London Uber, in 3 months, and there'll be a New York Uber if they don't get there. So I don't think in the current environment you can afford to go as slow as OpenTable had the ability to go. What happened in OpenTable's case is 3 guys were chasing the same market, but then the meltdown happened when the bubble burst, and the one thing OpenTable did well is they raised a huge round right before the bubble burst, so they had the capital to withstand nuclear winter. And so the other guys all went out of business, and they had open field running. And but in the current world, you cannot assume you'd have open field running.
Thank you for your time. My question is, if you have to put yourself in our shoes as an entrepreneur today, and with your knowledge and wisdom, and shortage of being technical, board members, so on and so forth, how would you go about in Silicon Valley and try to recruit them or steal it from other people? Or what would be the best solution to go about and do things, recruitment, and so on, and forming a company in a proper way without having all the resources?
It is a challenge. So if you want to do it in LA, you have to figure out where these people exist in LA, and they do exist in LA. There's a guy named Bill Gross started Idea Lab in the late '90s, and incubated a whole bunch of interesting companies. Actually, he was the guy who developed Google AdWords. He did it at a different company that that got purchased by Yahoo and died. But so there is talent here. Jake Weinbaum of Business.com, and Chuck Davis of Fandango and Shopzilla, and Bill Gross. So they are. I was on a panel earlier today. A woman named Dana Graycroft has a fund here. So they exist. You have to work harder to find them. And so you either find them or you import them. And it's pretty hard to import good engineers out of the valley. You may be able to import from otherward, but they do exist here. You just have to look a lot harder. There's a whole lot more signal to noise ratio.
I have a question.
Where are you? There.
Hi.
Yeah. There's a voice.
Yeah. You're talking about disruption accelerating rapidly. I've noticed. I'm sure everyone's noticed that the disruption is not only tech upon tech upon tech, but also social disruption enormously in other countries. And there's been a huge backlash with countries trying to start their own internet, like I think Iran's doing that, or Egypt is doing that. How do you think that this is that going to put a? There was a lot of hope from the scientific community, I guess, that the internet would bring the world together, but now it seems that people are pushing against that because they still want to hold their control or whatever it is, on their people that live in the country. So, what do you think about that whole scenario of what's happening, and how does that affect us? And
right. I think the internet did bring people together. The Arab Spring. You pick your world event, but it clearly does work when the internet. Seamless communications. I was just at a couple last year at an investor conference that has a ridiculously interesting group of people there, including government and things like that, and all the heads of state were talking about was Twitter, just like, can you see what it just did, and so I think the power is being manifested in that authoritarian regimes are trying to put the genie back in the bottle. So if China and Iran don't want that to happen, it's really hard to stop. But they're trying to jam the genie back in the bottle, and Egypt, I think, pulled the plug on the net a couple times. With mobile phones, it gets even harder. So it's just I think it's shoveling against the tide. I think that the populace is informed. I grew up at the end of the Cold War. The Russian citizens had no idea in what was happening in the world, what was happening in Russia. That just doesn't happen anymore. You can't, just kind of pull the veil over. So you have to actively suppress through these means. And so for me, it's the very power of the underlying phenomenon is what's leading to the reaction by a few authoritarian regimes. And in the long run, I don't think it has much of an effect. I don't think it'll even be successful because smart entrepreneurs are going to figure out their ways around that too. Frankly, if Iran's market potential is taking off the global e-commerce market, we'll probably survive. The one that's probably most captures my attention most is China. China is reputed to have a very active cyber program of potentially trying to extract information they shouldn't necessarily have. I mean, I've been told by people in the know that just don't bring a computer or a smartphone to China. Don't bring it in the country. Don't matter whether it's turned on or not, just don't bring anything in the country. I know people who take different computers with them when they go to China. They basically have a computer on the side. There's a computer in the office with nothing on it that you take to China. And so, given it's going to be the world superpower at some point, that's an interesting thing. But increasingly, governments are fighting wars through cyber terrorism. When it's rumored that the Americans and the Israelis shut down the Iranian centrifuges through a worm, it's rumored Iran then went back and shut down 30,000 computers at Saudi Aramco. With at the same time, all 30,000 turned on, showed a burning American flag, and blew up, and just were wiped clean. I mean, that's an interesting way to fight a battle. Yeah.
All right. Last question.
Yeah, I apologize. I am running back to San Francisco on the last flight.
As a VC, what are some of the best elevator pitches that you heard that grabs your attention? Because I know for sure that you heard hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what are good ones that attract you and really, stick with you to stick through the whole deck presentation?
Yeah. I mean, we do the hour no matter what. Yeah, we haven't yet gotten on. Sorry, man. That first 5 minutes sucked. But it's it's where. I mean, there are phrases for what an entrepreneur is doing that if they get them right, they just kind of grab your attention. And it's largely like, okay, this such and such market, I'm going to be, next generation Cisco because software-defined networking is cheaper, and Cisco's invulnerable because, this, and this. And you're just kind of like, okay, you just told a lot of information there. Huge market, here's why they're disruptive, the ambition of the entrepreneur. Do you believe it? What are the proof points? And it's that, analogies work really well. What X was to Y, I'm going to be to such and such. But it is some combination of analogy, ambition, and oh my God, that's so obvious, yet no one thought of it. And that is typically where someone comes in, and I will often describe the business to my partners very different than what the entrepreneur described the business to me. And just because I come to a different, something resonates with me, and he was calling it this, but I'm seeing it as, but so the elevator pitch is important. That first of all, it's how you get meetings and things like that, but it's you can communicate a whole lot in about 30 seconds. As an entrepreneur, salesmanship is huge. You are selling to get capital, you're selling to get employees, you're selling to get customers, you're selling to, you don't necessarily need to be a salesman, you have to be an effective seller. And so salesmen actually don't play well typically in our, where some guys, this guy's just selling me, versus, there's so much passion behind an idea that, just like, I'm ready, sign me up, pet food delivered to the house, let's go. It's, and yet a great CEO can do it all day long. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, guys, and good luck. Thank you.